Ramaphosa has hailed British Prime Minister Theresa May's visit to South Africa a success. May pledged to be the #1 investor on the African continent by 2022. She says her country has increased its investment program for African economies by £4 billion sterling. May also visited Kenya and Nigeria in the week. For more on this, I'm joined by economist Professor Raymond Parsons. He is with the Northwest University's Business School. Prof, a very good afternoon to you and thank you for coming in. Was Theresa May's visit to the continent worth the air travel?
Good afternoon. Well, I think it's a necessary visit for the United Kingdom because their agenda is very much the post-Brexit agenda. There's a lot of uncertainty around that. Will it be a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit? And it's important then to develop alternative strategies for the United Kingdom so that they can develop other markets or strengthen those markets in which they are already, like South Africa, so that hopefully there will be, whatever the outcome of the Brexit, that the United Kingdom can then follow new trade strategies and investment strategies, not only in their interests, but hopefully in the interests of the country with whom they do business.
And let's talk about Brexit then, because Theresa May is an embattled woman by any definition. Back home, you've got Britons who are less than pleased with the way these Brexit negotiations are progressing. The EU has in the past highlighted issues and concerns around whether or not her government will be able to meet the deadline to leave the European Union. So, given all of this trouble, how attractive a market is the United Kingdom for the likes of South Africa, Kenya and Nigeria?
I think it's still an attractive market. How attractive and how strong it will be after Brexit, that will depend on the outcome of the negotiations, and there's still a hard road ahead. The next couple of months will tell us whether they will resolve some of the uncertainties or whether Britain will just fall out of the EU. And that, of course, would be certainly not a very positive step, even for those countries that indeed do business with the United Kingdom. But at the moment, I think the strategies are to shore up those relationships and to strengthen those that could make a difference after Brexit, depending on the conditions on which the United Kingdom leaves the EU. We don't know that, but in the meantime, all relevant countries are doing certain contingency planning and consolidating whatever gains they already have between the United Kingdom and themselves.
What then should be the demands of these African countries as they go into negotiations with the UK?
Well, I think that the African countries are in a much stronger position than they were many decades ago. We talk a lot about colonization and its exploitation when it was the European countries who held the cards. That has changed. I think Africa holds much better cards now and is in a much better position to be able to negotiate with a country like the United Kingdom, but bearing in mind that other EU countries are also descending on Africa, apart from China. There's France, there's Germany, there's Turkey, there are quite a few others. So it's important that the African countries develop strategies and play the cards they have well, so that when you talk about investment and trade between, say, the United Kingdom or the EU and Africa, and you talk about investment and trade, you're talking about trying to create a win-win situation.
Theresa May has,
for both sides.
Theresa May has spoken about the UK's ambition, their vision to become the largest African investor in the G7 by 2022. Do you think that's a realistic target?
Well, I think it's good to have a target. I think that the United Kingdom's role in Africa will always be a substantial one because of history. But the fact remains, and because of these initiatives which are being taken now. But I think it's a little early to say whether in a few years' time it will be that the United Kingdom will be the leading player from an economic point of view in Africa, because so much hinges on the conditions of Brexit. That will determine how strong the British economy will be and how strong a British economy will emerge out of these Brexit negotiations. So I wouldn't want to commit myself to saying that that particular target will be reached, but it's quite clear that the United Kingdom is going to put a lot of effort behind trying to reach that target.
So, Professor Parsons, as we work towards that target then, who among these 3 states that she's been to now in this trip to Africa, South Africa, Kenya and Nigeria, who is more attractive to the United Kingdom as an investment destination?
Well, I have the impression that the long-standing relationships which we've sought to widen and deepen now as a result of this recent visit will very much depend on how South Africa plays its cards. And I want to make the point also that although we are fascinated by the headlines of the political leaders getting together, whether it's in China or in Nigeria or in South Africa, both Mrs. May and our president have taken large business delegations with them. And that's tremendously important because at the end of the day, they, as business people, have to lever these opportunities, these pieces of paper that are being signed, to concretize them in a way that will make a difference on the ground, that we will see more trade, see more investment, see more growth, and see more jobs. And for that, I think South Africa, with its own investment conference coming up in a few months' time, is now putting in place another building block in helping to create that better investment environment which we need. And the fact that, as our president said in Beijing today, he is committed to reducing the policy uncertainty that we want to see in order to create that favorable investment environment. And these bilateral relationships, as between us and the United Kingdom, are tremendously important in helping to create that environment which we must then exploit and play our cards and make it a win-win situation for all parties concerned.
You've brought up this China-Africa summit that is underway in Beijing as we speak. And that brings me to this question then. The Chinese are quite big as far as stamping their role or their involvement in Africa as investors and partners. How then might they look upon the United Kingdom's intention to enlarge its territory, if you will, or its share of investment on the continent?
Well, let me put it this way. My perspective is that perhaps that the Chinese think they've got an advantage because over the past two decades or so, they have been a consistently developing player in Africa. What has happened with some of the European countries, and it's not only Brexit, it's the feeling that because of the Chinese involvement in Africa, that they need to wake up. And hence you are getting these trips from Mrs. May, from the French president, from the German chancellor. They're all converging on Africa. And that's partly because they realize that the Chinese have got an advantage, and now they need to be part of this highly competitive environment within which we have to maximize our own interests.
Very quickly, do you think Theresa May will live long enough politically to see some of these promises come to pass?
I think that it will all depend on the outcome of Brexit. If she can negotiate a successful Brexit and a win-win situation for the EU and for Britain, then I think her political chances of survival are good. If, however, this whole Brexit thing goes sour, then I think you will see there will be a political reaction in the United Kingdom, and she may not be the winner thereof.
All right, Professor Raymond Parsons with the Northwest University's Business School there, giving us a sense of his understanding and forecast after the conclusion of British Prime Minister Theresa May's visit to Africa. She was in South Africa, Kenya, as well as Nigeria. Well,